Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio online lunchtime talk. These are live every Friday at 1 p.m, beaming out to you on your smartphones, laptops, iPads, and living room TVs. My name's Rachel Burton, and I'm a producer at Watershed, working on Bristol and Bath creative R&D. These talks are our chance to throw open the digital doors of the Pervasive Media Studio, and for you to hear more from the people who are part of our community or who are working on things that excite us. An especially big welcome to those of you who are new to the studio or for whom this may be the first time you're engaging with us. For all of those newcomers, here's a little bit more information about what we do. The Pervasive Media Studio is a diverse and collaborative community, exploring creativity and technology, exploring everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. We're a partnership between Watershed, University of the West of England and University of Bristol. It's a home for early ideas, companies, and a meeting place of both creative and commercial industries. It's a studio space, offering desk space, meeting rooms, events and opportunities, all for free. It's a safe place for artists to take risks in their practice and make time for collaboration. So this week's talk is by Roxana Vilk and Birtles. Roxana Vilk and Squidsoup were commissioned by Bristol and Bath Creative R&D as part of our expanded performance Pathfinder to develop a prototype. Circle, or Dayore in Farsi, is a collaborative project exploring themes of inclusion, immersive experiences, and shared spaces. There'll be a Q&A at the end, with the talk running at roughly 40 minutes. If you want to ask any questions, just pop them in the chat window and I'll pick them out to our speakers. Or if you like, you can tweet your questions to @PMStudioUK. Please feel free to share the link now on any of your socials. We'd love for your friends to join us. A captioned and recorded version of this talk will also be available here after the talk is finished. This is the last talk of the summer before we return in September with a new programme of talks, looking at everything from climate change, class issues in socially engaged practice, AI and Black voices, the sounds of soil, hydroponics, and much, much more. So we'll be back on the 3rd of September after today. You can get news on all our future talks by following us on @PMStudioUK on Twitter or @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or subscribing to our newsletter on our website. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you don't miss out on all our latest content. And while you're there, give the video a thumbs up. The more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. So that's enough from me now. I will hand over to Roxana and Liam.
Hi everyone, thank
Hello,
you
everybody.
for joining us. I'm Roxana, this is Liam. And we're going to have a very informal conversation with you. We're going to take you behind the scenes of our creative process. And as Rachel very kindly said at the beginning, there will be a Q&A at the end. But if you've got questions as you go along, just pop them in the chat, because we'd really like this to be a conversation, as we're very much mid-process of making this new work, Dayere, or circle in English. I am going to take you through my slides, which I'm hoping that you can all see at this point. So as you can see from the first image, I'm standing beneath this, this round circle of lights, which we'll call orbs for the rest of this talk. And as we unpack the talk, you'll find out more about what is going on inside each of these magical orbs. So roughly our plan, which might go out the window because both being creatives and quite long chatters, Liam and I might just end off on a tangent. We're going to talk to you about the intention of why we started our collaboration and ended up applying for the prototype funding, our process, where we got to, where we're going, and invite questions. So let's start with our intention. So when Liam and I first met, we were on the expanded performance fellowship, and I think it's fair enough to say, Liam, jump in, that we had a shared interest and love of live experiences with music and how to communicate those to an audience and to break down barriers between audiences. So when we applied for the prototype research, the ambition of the idea was to test and build a unique spatialised compositional tool for live performance. And again, touching on what Liam and I were both interested in terms of inclusivity, immersive experiences and shared spaces. And very much we were looking at the relationship between performer, audience and space, and we're still unpacking that.
I think, yeah, so to Roxana, to add into that, that was one of the key touch points for us, was that relationship between performer and audience, and breaking that barrier between audience and performer in the performance space. So making it a sort of flatter space where everyone was part of that performance.
Exactly, and this word immersive, if I can pronounce it correctly, immersive gets thrown around a lot, and it'd be really good for us both to sort of unpack what that means to us as well. But firstly, let's just talk about the prototype itself, which Liam is going to unpack for you. This idea of this AudioWAVE technology and where we've got to with that, and essentially also looking at what liveness means to us in an age where you can make music from samples and just upload those samples and play them off as a DJ set. Liam and I were really, and everybody else involved in this project, we should say that there's 2 of us speaking now, but as you'll see in the photos that come along, we are a massive team. So we're talking on behalf of the whole team that have been involved in this. Yeah, so togetherness, trust and empathy, and how we get to those spaces where the line between audience performance can be blurred. So I work often as a community musician, and at the moment I have been associate artist at Trinity. So togetherness and how making music in groups, in circles, that idea of call and response with sound was a real starting point for Liam and I. Liam, do you want to talk about your experience?
Yeah, I was going to follow on from that, actually, that was probably really where our conversation started, that idea that there are ways in which there are mechanisms that Roxana used in terms of bringing communities together that provided a structure for working on. Squidsoup are a company that kind of creates quite technologically heavy artworks, and we've been playing with, I mean, the image you can see in front of you is an image of probably a very well-known quartet performance in a large in the large LED grid, and that was a kind of light layer added over the top of a quartet performance. But in that work, there was a separation between the musician and the audience. Although Kieran had chosen to put himself in the center of the audience to try and further define that relationship, and we'd layered light over that audience, we wanted to try and expand that and take it further. And so in the conversations with Roxana, what became apparent was that the mechanisms, the way that she was working with communities, and the kind of musical and improvisational practices we were using offered a way of sort of starting to break that audience performer narrative down, positioning down. Tacked onto that, we had begun developing an artwork and a technology that used, instead of just putting points of light in space, put points of sound in space, to create a kind of a really fully immersive sonic experience, a multi-point sound experience in space. Not an attempt to reproduce perfect audio, but actually placing sound as though you were walking through an orchestra or a multitude or multiplicity of voices. That was the point. Underpinning this is a really complicated and set of technologies that we've developed over quite a long time. For those of you that are quite geeky, this is a board with 14 LEDs on it, an ESP32, 16 gigabytes of memory. It's what's called an IoT device. It's an Internet of Things technology. These devices all sit on a wireless network, and we can communicate to them, sending events to trigger sound and light in space. So we developed that in order to create sound and light immersive spaces. And that's just a picture of the speaker. They've all got little 3-watt speakers in them on the base. So as you're stood underneath them, you get a sound experience. and we can trigger these in the hundreds of devices at once. So what you've seen, just to lead into where Roxana's going to jump off next, so what you've seen in that space is about 140 of these devices suspended in a circle, all of which we can control in real time. We can send events to them, and Roxana can load sounds and onto these devices.
Thank you, Liam. That's really brilliant, the way you unpack that. Every time I hear it, I feel like I'm getting a little bit closer to understanding it, but still, you know, there's a long way for me to go as well in terms of the possibilities. And I think because we're mid-process, what we'd like to share with you is our journey so far. So what does this all actually mean for myself coming from the live music side of things, and for Liam coming from the Squidsoup side of things, and the team that we work with? So Ollie, Hannah, Pete, getting people coming in, also practitioners reflecting on what we're doing. We've had a lot of conversations, so we've had to work hard to find a common methodology and approach. As you can see from the image, we are in a kind of theatre space. So Trinity Centre here in Bristol very kindly let us set up the orbs and this grid, and let us rehearse at a time when events weren't happening. So that was really helpful, wasn't it, Liam? Just to have that time. And
I mean, I think just in terms of the methodology, as one of the things that we didn't even necessarily recognize as being a methodology. When you think of R&D as an approach, you think of a quite a static. You think of people being in workshops, being in labs, developing in that way. But actually, what we realized in the process of this, because basically we could get access to the Trinity space because of Roxana's relationship, we were able to get access to the Trinity space, and we made that the R&D process. We made performance an R&D process, which I don't know about you, Roxana, but I'd never really thought of it in that way before, going, okay, this is a musician, we're going to go and make a piece of music. Oh, that's research and development. And that in itself was quite a big piece of learning for us.
And for me, it's always by making a performance, I have to work things out with an audience. In other words, like, I can have all the ideas in my head or work collaboratively with another musician, like in this example, Pete, but until someone hears it or responds to it, it's not real. So it was really interesting for us coming together from these two different, maybe not so different ways of working, but we had to find a methodology, didn't we? And Hannah, our producer, over this whole project, Hannah Brady from Squidsoup, has been brilliant in kind of designing these kind of sprints that we do with Ollie, who was writing all the code, so that we test a specific idea each week. And let me just take you through that. So we're going to go backstage, if you like, and look at some of the behaviors we put on the orbs, because as we said, when Liam was unpacking the technology, the possibilities are limitless. So we wanted to start really clearly. So we started with placing a series of chords on the orbs and seeing what happened as the sound moved around the space. And for me as a musician, it was so interesting to kind of come up with something on a piano, let's say, and then how different that feels when it's spatialized, because that in itself changed everything. So maybe let's just take a peek at our instrument setup. So I was on a Nord, Pete was on a series of gongs. We wanted to keep this live, but at the same time, we knew that we had to upload samples onto the orb, so that we were dancing between that fine line of playing live. We wanted the flexibility to improvise. And I think this is key to the creative conversation, because you could set things up, you know, to be very exact. And that for me takes away from the liveness of music, because live music happens in the moment. And we needed the orbs to be alive in that way. So by setting up a modal sense of music, so staying in, let's say, one key, then we knew we could improvise within that. And the behaviors on the orbs could be sped up, slowed down, fragmented, broken around, but we had some parameters. So as I put in that final sentence, how do we create a loose enough structure to still be live about music making? That was one of our challenges. And if we could go to the first video, then that would be really helpful, Martin, just to play this first concept of putting chords on the orbs and playing along to them and seeing how it felt. This was like okay, brilliant. As you can see in the image, there is a piece of wood on the ground, which Liam is going to talk to you about in a minute, but I just wanted to explain musically what came up for us after we did that little sprint around placing these chords on the orbs, was that we quickly realized the high end frequencies, so the kind of higher notes that you hear naturally with your ears, were being represented, but the low end, the kind of sub bass, the music that you feel deep in your body, those lower sounds, we couldn't find them on the orbs. So Liam came up with this brilliant idea of putting, do you want to tell us what you did on?
Yeah, well, I mean, this ties back to something we'd already begun thinking about, which is the idea that sound kind of has a kind of a stratification in space. So thinking about sound as the orbs as being the high frequencies up high, the sort of bass sitting in the middle, and then sort of sub bass at a ground level. And so basically it's a reasonably familiar technology, but we were thinking about the audience relationship to the work and thinking about where they might sit in space. So we created basically a bass speaker, a vibrating bass speaker. You can buy these drivers, which are in fact just, they're basically speaker cones without the cones that you can affix to surfaces, and basically they give you a really good tactile kind of sound sensation, and we use these to add a layer of bass in, so that we could have high notes responding and then bass notes responding to those high notes. And that kind of calls back, Roxana, it probably calls back to one of the things that we discussed right at the start, which is the notion of call and response being a kind of key behavior that we might build from, thinking about the way the audience would relate to the space. I mean, putting the orbs in a circle was very, very intentional, because we had thoughts about how the audience might relate to the work and where Roxana might perform. And as part of the testing, so we had an idea that the sound moving, so as you can see in there, the chords are moving round in that space. We had an idea that it's hard to get a sense of from the video just how spatialized the sounds is in these contexts, but the sound moving towards you and away from you it's quite different than a static performance where you're always expecting your music to come from one direction.
I think let's look at the next video to get a sense of that, please. The second one, sorry.
Let the music of your soul carry you through all the pain and the hurt. Let the music of your soul carry you through all the pain and the hurt. As you emerge from your darkest hour, as you emerge from your darkest hour, will be in your life.
Yeah, so that was another little experiment we were doing around pre-recording samples. So I just sampled my voice singing lots of different notes and then placing those on the orbs. Again, it's hard on a little film to get a sense of the spatialized sound, but it felt very different when you could move through the sound, and it started to let us take more risks really creatively in what we were going to explore sonically. So I'm just going to take you to the next video when we started to play with gong sounds and sounds that had a lot of natural reverb. We started to explore that and playing with samples and then improvising around them and starting to explore movement. Yes, can we go to the next video, please, Martin?
You relax if you want. I've got some wicked ones. Okay. That's not what I made you guys.
Yes, Liam, do you want to chat a little bit about what we were up to there with the?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah. I think what you can see from the videos, you can see a kind of the texture of light and sound working together. So in the first video, you saw that we were kind of very clearly placing a sequence of sounds at points in a space, and it's quite clearly structured. The second two clips, what you can begin to see is that actually we're starting to play with the texture of the space, the texture of sound in the space. We're using a behavior there that we'd created, which is a flicker behavior, which I was going to talk about later in the slides, but we'll talk about it now because it makes sense. And that flicker behavior is effectively randomly firing sounds in space. And that firing of sounds, you can vary its intensity. So you can have lots and lots of flickers, or you can have sparse flickers. And what you begin to realize is, as Roxana began to explore and play in the space, our expectation was that we'd need a lot more control of the system in order to get that kind of liveness in the space. But actually what you began to see is that setting a set of sound samples running in space and adjusting the parameters only subtly, Roxana was able to kind of refer to her modal musical processes and to create improvisations around and in and through that musical form, and giving the whole space a kind of sonic texture.
Yeah, and I think that again, we're mid-process, so let's see where we go with all of this. But just even the terminology that Squidsoup we're using, so what Ollie and Liam were talking about, the flickers and the wave, they sound like movement to me, whether it's musical movement, physical movement, which is why I was keen to bring in some dancers as well to start exploring the space as performers. Again, they were amazing because they just instinctively started to improvise to both the light, the sound, and the next step of our creative process was to look at putting commands on the on each part of the orb, so that we could almost kind of direct some movement around the space. Let's go to the. Is your £5? Oh, sorry. My son's just paid £5. I'm not sure what for. Could we go to the next video, please? So the clip that you just watched was one of our research and development performances with audiences in the space. Obviously kind of like COVID rules, everyone was 2 meters apart in little bubbles, but it changed everything for us because we suddenly saw how hypnotic the effect of being under the orbs was for people. Many people said that it just sort of went into kind of like a trance state, or they just wanted to be in this kind of other world, where this other world had its own logic and its own rules, which became really exciting, especially with the piece going forward, that we're creating a world, and what can we do to kind of hold that world longer and explore the possibilities of the light and the sound. And as you can see, also kids just seem to absolutely love it as well. Yeah, so I don't know if there's anything you want to talk to about the way we worked tech-wise there, Liam, and how we're going to the next stage of kind of wearable tech.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I was going to say was that what was interesting was that the space was actually perhaps more controlled, certainly, than I imagined because of COVID. And there's just things that we perhaps haven't mentioned. We actually tried Roxana being outside of the space and also inside of the space, performing from the center. The intention is to move to wearable tech. So what you can see on this slide here actually is you can see in the background is our processing application, which is the interface. The text is basically we are sending to these units a series of text commands. They all get a series of strings sent through open sound control messages, if you're interested in that sort of thing. And it's a series of parameters which instruct them to behave in certain kinds of ways. So we're not sending events individually to devices, we're just sending them all an event and saying, do as you will in response to this event. And some of them are outside of the parameters of that event, and some of them are inside of the parameters of that event. So for this piece of development, actually, Oliver, who was controlling the software interface for the orbs, was actually up on a stage so that he could control it in real time. So that's a view of his stage. You can just to your right hand side see the laptop. He's sitting next to a standard lighting desk, looking down on the performance space. The feedback that we got was, we tried with Roxana performing outside. The feedback that we got was actually that we were right. She needed to be in the center of the space. And what we realized in the process, and the next stage that we're going to, is actually also to give Roxana control of the interface, to simplify that interface down so that she can fire off and control events within that performance space, within those compositions that she has created. The idea being that actually it becomes a much more fluid space. There's less, to refer you back to the start, the purpose of this project is actually to change the performance space, to change the relationship between performer and audience, to level that space, to make it a much more publicly owned space. And in order to do that, we need to kind of try and remove all those things which give the performer perceived control of the space, the kind of watcher, the person controlling it, so that you are in there with the performer. So we're going to move towards having a touch OSC interface. Actually, we're just going to go with something very simple for the moment, which is run from a mobile phone, and we will allow Roxana to trigger events so that she is taking control of the whole performance. Is this for me again, Roxana? Yeah.
Well, actually, yeah, it would be good to talk about the flicker and wave a little bit more, but also just coming back to this image, the great thing about kids is that they're gonna tell you very truthfully what needs to happen in a space, and they're the best audience as far as I'm concerned, because they don't have that politeness barrier. And what was great observing the kids and the babies was that they just wanted to move or around, lie down, roll around. And it comes back to that beautiful tile that Liam was exploring with the sub bass. We'd really like to start exploring this idea of the floor space as well, being connected to the orbs above and having a sub bass underneath you, perhaps in some way. and giving the audience the freedom to explore the space as they want to.
Yeah, I think I was going to say to you, actually, one of the things that was unexpected to me was you bringing in dancers. Although I was expecting to dance around in the space, it was bringing in dancers was actually, we were looking through the imagery just actually yesterday we were looking at the imagery, and what we realized was just how the imagery of dancers is evocative of the space, and how their movement through the space, for me certainly, it acted as a kind of they acted as a kind of almost like a fluid medium between an audience and the work itself. They acted as a kind of joining mechanism that kind of pushed the work forward as they interpreted it and responded. Just flip back to Flicker and Wave, just because I just had one thing. So as I described,
Just going to shut my window like an aeroplane.
Yeah. No, the process here was quite a complicated one. It was difficult for all of us. Roxana had a musician's very clear kind of, I am creating performances, I am creating songs within this space. But our technology was very unfinished when we went into this space. So there was a lot of development going on, and what we could and couldn't do at points changed. It changed on a day-to-day basis, and how things crashed and worked and didn't work, and then they worked one day and then didn't work another day. What's important was that what we kind of gradually reduced this down to is the fact that in order for musicians, in order to work in a performance way, in the same way that Roxana used that kind of uses a modal approach, we needed an almost modal approach from Squidsoup's perspective, where we have behaviors that have an effect, that have a kind of effect that can be learned by a musician or an audience. The temptation always with technology is to create these expansive tools that can do everything, but actually it doesn't give a performer or an artist anything to hang on to. It's an empty space. They need walls to kick against. They need things to interact with and break. So yeah. Flicker and Wave are basically two of our behaviors.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, Liam, about with tech shorthand, we could say you could do everything you want, but actually we had the parameters of liveness, and I think that was a really good parameter in many ways, because improvisation and responsiveness in the moment, and obviously Ollie was doing a lot of that. I often joke saying that it was like he was playing a saxophone improv in the middle, because he was live coding at moments, which was really exciting. I kind of wish the audience could see his screen at the same time as what we were up to. Maybe that's something we could do in the future, but that something that I'm a bit scared of as we go forward is control, because if I wear something that means that I can control everything, will I lose collaboration? And I feel like at the heart of this new work we're creating together is collaboration, and collaboration is a complex, fragile, living being that needs love and nurture and group dynamic. And as much as I'm excited by the wearable tech, I'm also aware of what I might lose. So just coming back to the phase one, what we learned is Ollie being part of the performance, and how we kind of keep that heart of it, the series of behaviors that work, the moving of chords, the flickers, the voice, and then placing performers in the center, relationship with the audience, and an installation mode versus the performance mode. So that's something we haven't had a chance to really talk about yet, but we set the orbs up also as an installation with lots of lullabies from different recordings that I've done across Bristol, from all the beautiful many languages that are in our city, and people could walk through the lullabies and hear these sounds. And that gave a very different relationship with the structure. So I think what we're going to explore in the next phase is we've got two worlds. We've got installation world and performance world, and that gives the audiences two worlds to explore. This is the this is the team so far, ever growing, and it just gives you a sense of how many of us are behind this. Liam and I are talking today, but really it is a collaboration, and I feel very strongly with this incredible opportunity we've got with this prototype funding, is that it is the collaboration that we've got to take forward with all of us, and many people not even in this photo. Is there anything else you want to say, Liam, before we sort of open up to some questions?
I feel like we've absolutely skipped through it. And
oh, have we? Have we?
And I was just realizing how much we kind of haven't said.
Oh no, that's me. Once I get going, I can be a bit.
No, I think we should just leave it for questions now. I think, and if Rachel, if you want to highlight any gaps that you think, oh, could you explain that a little bit, or perhaps
I would just like to plug that we are going to be taking it to the Egg in Bath in early September as part of Living Tree, which is going to be a whole new world, because they're basically putting a forest inside the theatre, and it's going to be a different way of exploring this work. And then Bristol Beacon, September 29th. Yeah, got that in. Yeah, so please feel free to pop any questions in the chat. We'd love to start a conversation about where we're at, or engage with us in any other ways.
Thank you so much, Roxana and Liam. That was so brilliant. I know that you can't see the chat, so I just really wanted to start by picking out a couple of the adjectives that some of the audience have used about your work. So stunning, beautiful, cool, gorgeous. Like, they're coming up again and again, so people really, really do think your work is beautiful. So take that home with you from this.
Thanks very much.
So please do share your questions in the chat for Roxana and Liam. Ollie has been answering some tech questions in the chat, which is super helpful. Thanks so much, Ollie. I actually wanted to kick off with a question to pick up on a couple of things that you've both said. So, Roxana, you talked really beautifully about collaboration and wearable tech, and actually the tension there about what that might change. Like, that's exciting, but also you have a real concern about the collaborative element. And I was just wondering, are the audience collaborators too? And you talked also about the kind of installation mode versus the performance mode. Is there a difference there? So are the audience collaborators, and how do you want them to feel in those different modes? That's a question for both of you, really.
That's a really beautiful question. Are the audience collaborators? Definitely. We just need to get out more with them. You know, that's what I'm aching and, you know, really wanting to do is explore that completely. But how they are collaborators is something that's unfolding for us. I know that we also talked, didn't we, Liam, about movement sensors and looking at ways that an audience might explore the space as well, and how that might affect the org. I don't know if you want to talk about that while I shut my other window.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say is actually I think there is that Roxana's expressed a concern about the having the wearable tech and actually losing the collaboration, but that kind of, to me, the relationship with the audience, I think having something where you've got more, Roxana's got more control, and the technology isn't outside of the world but is actually present in the world, will actually allow far more of a collaboration. My hope is that going forward is that there'll be less sort of accoutrements of performance in the actual performance space, and that people will be able to flow through and join, and that Roxana will be able to meander amongst them, using the technology to interact with them and to create a performance. But absolutely, the whole point of it is that the audience are collaborators, that it is an act of creative composition between mediated and informed by Roxana.
Actually, that's something that we didn't show in the video clips, but there was one point in the R&D performances at Trinity where I sang a couple of lines and then I asked the audience to sing with us. And the feedback for that particular kind of moment was so powerful. People, you know, obviously we have also been under this kind of pandemic separated from hearing each other's voices in a space, so there was the emotion of that, but having a series of notes on the orbs that you're singing along to, this world that you're part of, they said that that was really very powerful, and it's something that we really want to start exploring, because when Liam and I first started chatting, and in fact even in the pitch that we did, we were like, I'm going to sing a phrase, sing it back to me. You know, it's that idea of being together and the orbs being alive as a being that's singing with you in a space, supporting you, elevating you, holding you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Joseph has got a follow-on question to that. He's asking, do you think you'll offer guidance to the audience on how to interact? Do you have concerns that they'll not, excuse me, not follow the lead of the kids and be very static?
Brilliant question. Yeah, we need to do like a workshop beforehand to all like find our inner child. That's a really good point. Something that's coming up already in the creative chats for Bath is like, do we need guides to help us kind of feel confident to explore the space? I think it's a question, Joseph, of trial and error. You know, we'll try it, and then if it feels too much, too heavy, too hands-on, then the opposite. Yeah, I don't know what your instinct.
I think it's a really difficult one. I mean, having done lots of sort of interactive work over the years, I think my preference is for very light touch. I think as soon as you start instructing people how to behave in a space, you change their mode of thought. I think the instruction, for me, just riffing off the top of my head, I think actually one of the methods that Roxana uses, which is the call response. I call it a method. It's an approach. It's a way of making people, actually is an instruction onto how to behave in the space. And I think that probably my take would be that we build those into the start, so that there is kind of like a setting of the tone and behavior before actually then you go into the space in some way. It's not, there's no direct relationship. We just, you know, it's like a little bit of meditation before you go and do something. It's like, now I'm in the right headspace.
I think it connects with that thing that we were chatting about earlier, about creating a world that has its own logic that you immediately understand. It's that feeling when you go into a forest, the energy shifts for you and you kind of move in a forest because you accept the way that space feels. And I think if we can work hard to create a space where people feel free enough, then that's part of our job as artists, really, is to create that invitation. And I think you're absolutely right, Joseph. It's such a good question, because it's something that's at the heart of all our practices, Squidsoup and mine and Vilk Collectives, is the invitation.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, definitely.
There's a question from Harrison here, I think probably more on the installation side. They've said, what scale can you see this reaching? For example, I was thinking the AudioWAVE would be amazing in the 2 tunnels greenway, making light and sound as people cycle miles through.
I can quickly answer that. We've done about 800 devices over quite a large space around a building in Smoker, but not for live performances. Ollie can probably speak to the network speeds if he's on the chat, but in theory, it's a mesh network. It's the only limits really are latency, and we've managed to get that down to quite a low level. So you can put tens of thousands of devices in a space and make them. It's cost is always the issue, but yeah, it'd be lovely. We're working on a project to put them in public spaces, not as a performance tool, but as installations, and yeah, I think yeah, it'd be really amazing to do it. We can go quite large.
Thanks, Liam. I had a question, I guess, following on a little bit from that, but more about the the future of the performance of Circle or Dayare, and thinking, so like, what's next? What is the future for it? Thinking beyond September, beyond your R&D, where would you like to see it go in the next year or two?
I think one of the dreams that we've had is to be able to tour it as a piece of work that has a kind of openness to it, that allows communities to come and get involved, whether it's, let's say, taking it to a city where we then invite lots of people to come in and workshop with us and maybe create something for the installation mode, collaborate with local performers. Originally, we were going to take it to WOMAD this year before it got cancelled. And one of the dreams there, because it was going to be hung in the forest, an actual forest, was that we'd collaborate with lots of the visiting musicians and audiences from WOMAD and create a kind of a storytelling vibe as well. So again, coming back to that idea of you create a world and then see what's possible within that world. Massive heart of this piece is inclusion in terms of access to new tech. And I feel like we haven't managed that yet fully because of COVID. So I'd really like the next steps as we take it on tour to open the doors for people interested in how this all works, who want to have a go, to be able to come and have a go.
From my perspective, that obviously the touring, the work in the form that we've got is I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. I mean, I know Roxana and Hannah are working together on making that happen. In terms of the tech, I think what is great about working with Roxana is she brings a very specific musical vibe, and I think what she's alluded to there was the thing about going to WOMAD would be that we could explore the different musical approaches there might be to take the tool set that's now developing and push it. Although I don't have a particular love of rap, I am really interested in the bit that Roxana and I knew was going to work, was the taking of her well-established lullabies piece and putting it into a spatializing it. We kind of knew that would work, that spatializing the audio in that way. That spatializing of the voice, I would really like to see how we can. What I know is trying to quantify this in a way that makes sense. There is a sense in which young people need to speak and have a way to speak in a public space. Certain musical genres represent that capacity to speak. They give you a kind of poetry, a kind of voice, a kind of way. I really like the idea of kind of taking this to a stage where we can have kind of spoken word, we can have people walking through this space kind of rapping to themselves or talking to themselves, doing kind of using language to interact with the space in a way that doesn't happen with other forms of music. Very much carrying on that singing together vibe, but taking it to, adding more rhythm, making it sort of more musical. Sorry, Roxana, I'm talking a lot on this one. The other thing is I'd really like to get this kind of notion of it being songs kind of nailed down, so that it's only occurring, I'm just riffing now, but it's only occurring to me now that there is one of the issues in music is actually artists just get video and their works gets ripped off and just put on YouTube and sold everywhere. If you've got a spatialized piece of music or a spatialized performance, that the technology and all has to go to somewhere in order for you to get that proper experience. You only ever get a kind of half of the experience. And that's really important.
That's really important right now, that idea of live music. And that comes back to the heart of our intention, which was liveness and togetherness. And especially right now, like, as you say, music to make a living as a musician, it really is about taking the work out in a live way, and for people to go, did you experience that? Oh, you had to have been there. I think it is something that luckily still, can only exist as a live thing. Obviously, we've also explored access. So what if you couldn't get to the performance? We've been exploring binaurally. How could you record this, or perhaps 360 capture it in a live way? Because that is something we've been talking about, isn't it? Like a hybrid performance. Hannah and I have been chatting about how if you want to take a work on tour, how do international bookers or arts organizations see it? Because you can't get the sense of the spatialisation of the sound. So how do we record that and honour that? So that's...
Yeah, I mean, something that just occurred to me there, Roxana, was that I was just reflecting on the NT Live, the sort of live theatre broadcast to cinema might be something we could pick up. That'd be quite interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Got a question here from Melissa. They've asked, what were you most worried about before you started this collaboration?
That's a really good question. I was worried about so many things.
All of it.
Because I'm a worrier. I was worried about not being allowed to rehearse in a space because of COVID. I was worried about me not being able to kind of get a grip of the tech quick enough to start playing with it. There is that sense that you know, you've only got a certain amount of time, and I'm sure Liam's the same, kind of set ourselves these huge targets to try and reach. So I was worried about that. I was worried about how we're going to collaborate, whether it would work. And we did have some moments where it was really difficult. But I think sometimes the best collaborations are ones where, I'm not saying you need loads of conflict, but you actually you come from different worlds, and you've got to find a way to play.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think definitely. I mean, I think I'm trying to think. In response to that, I honestly didn't have the technology. I knew our technology was quite unfinished and really not ready for the live performance. One of the things that we didn't say was that this happened far sooner in the process. We were it was right at the start, and it was like, okay, and Squidsoup weren't really ready. We weren't in that process. So that was my biggest concern, was we're not really ready. Having spoken to Roxana, my hope was that it would be quite relaxed in that space. And some bits were not relaxed.
Let's
not even go there. Honestly, oddly, I wasn't that worried about much of it. I thought I wasn't. I had goals that were a very long way in the future. I think the only thing it's the concepts that I've got are quite a long way away. And actually, my main concern is that forgetting that that's the goal and just kind of settling for, well, we've got to this stage, because now I'm just going, right, we need to keep going, because it's thing is over there.
We need to keep going. And I think that's what's exciting about the next two opportunities, is that each time we're just going to push it a little bit more. And it'd be great for anyone who is watching in the chat just to come and join us, or if you can't join us, find another way of connecting with us, because the feedback for us is the way that we move forward. Feedback that we've had so far and where we could grow, that's how we're going to grow, with the audiences.
Roxana, can you remind us again of those dates when people can...
Yeah, so if you're in Bristol, 29th of September, Bristol Beacon. And if you are in Bath or near Bath, there is a whole kind of festival happening at the Egg, which is called Living Forest and Living Tree, and we'll be part of that, both as an installation and as live performances. At the moment, we're just nailing down the actual dates for the performances, but it looks like it will be around kind of 10, 11, 12th of September. But if you stay connected with us, we'll definitely let you know. And there'll be some kind of industry sharings as well. So if you'd like to come to those and be part of the kind of Q&A artistically, we would love that.
Fantastic. Alexander says, please come to the US. Alexander, if you've got a way to make that happen, get in touch.
Yeah, I'll send us an email, and we will be in the US.
I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much, Roxana and Liam, for sharing your talk with us and your process. It's been brilliant to hear you reflect on it, and fantastic to see it as you've gone through, and I think a really, really interesting approach to R&D in the way that you've brought audiences and everybody along with you from the start. So thank you.
I'd just like to say a big thank you to you, Rachel, because you've been super supportive of our process and always there for us, even when we're having the wobbles, even if it's the wobble
very
before
much.
we start. So I really appreciate your positivity, your encouragement, and yeah, everyone in the team that you work with. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So this is the last talk of the summer before we return in September with a new programme of talks looking at everything from climate change, class issues in socially engaged practice, AI and Black voices, the sounds of soil, hydrophonics, and much, much more. We'll be back on the 3rd of September. You can get news on all our future talks by following us on @PMStudio on Twitter or @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or subscribing to our newsletter on our website. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you don't miss out on all our latest content. And while you're there, give the video a thumbs up. The more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. Please feel free to share this link. A captioned and recorded version of this talk will be available to watch again shortly after we finish. Thank you so much for watching, especially on this really super hot sunny day. Hope you have a lovely summer, and we will see you back here in September.